Life comes with a lot of decisions, and it can be hard to know the right path sometimes. A therapist can help you map out what you really want, so you trust yourself to make great choices and feel excited about the future. BetterHelp offers convenient professional online therapy on your schedule, however you want it, by phone, chat, or video call. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/positive today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/positive.
This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
He's got all the insight on what you want to know and maybe some of what you don't want to know. Here's K-State insider Tim Fitzgerald.
All right, welcome back in, everybody, to Sports Daily. We may not have ever had a better timed spot with Tim Fitzgerald than, well, right now, Fitz, because Colorado appears to be in. Something's happening with Oregon. We have waited for this first domino. We could all see it coming. It has fallen. Welcome into Sports Daily, Fitz.
It's Christmas. No, it's just amazing how long this has taken, because this was the obvious first step for many months that Colorado would be the first domino to fall. It just took them a while because they kept hoping the Pac-12 would get their you-know-what together, and they just can't seem to do that. But I'm expecting the Pac-12 to fully blame the Big 12 for everything wrong in the world by tonight.
There you go. Of course they will. And it only makes sense. And yet, on the other hand, how can the Pac-12 not look themselves in the mirror and go, you know something? We have problems, and we're the reason why, because they are the reason why.
Oh, they're absolutely the reason why. But it's turned into a conference of gaslighting. They blame everyone. They lie to everyone. I mean, the presidents and chancellors in that conference are really the issue. They've hired back-to-back bad commissioners, and nothing is ever their doing. It's always someone else. I think the most incredible farce during this entire process is when the commissioner, George Kliavkoff, blamed the Big 12 for all of their problems not long after the Big Ten took their two Los Angeles schools. It's just been comical to watch how poorly run that conference is.
Fitz, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a combination of these things. The Big 12 doing the right things, the Pac-12 doing the wrong things. Colorado doesn't want to wait anymore. Okay, so Colorado is an interesting school. Everybody likes them because of Prime right now, but, that's not in real terms that big a loss for the Pac-12, but is it enough of a domino to make things go quickly? I don't know why else this emergency Oregon meeting would be happening. So, is this the beginning of it, or is this a one-off?
Well, apparently there's something dealing with Dan Lanny's contract that they need to approve, but the timing of this is very interesting with Oregon. And this all comes up because my colleague at the Arizona 24/7 Sports site, Jason Scheer, reported that one of his sources that has been real helpful to him, because he's been all over this, said there's another Pac-12 school in play here for the Big 12, and it's not one of the four corners. So I think by the process of elimination, we get to Oregon, because I think it's been made clear that Oregon State and Washington State, the combination of who they are and where they are hasn't moved the needle. Washington seems so focused on the Big Ten, and they are an AAU school, a strong academic school. The Big 12 wants nothing to do with Stanford and Cal. We just eliminate everyone but Oregon, who also hopes to get to the Big Ten, but I think is beginning to realize the Big Ten isn't going to take them. They're just not. They've got too many other choices out there, that makes the athletic argument better. So we'll see what develops today, but I think it'll start setting off some panic in that conference, because it's not like they're on the cusp of announcing a deal and Colorado jumped. There appears to be no deal. Everything we're hearing behind the scenes is it has fallen apart time after time under the weight of absurd Pac-12 demands, and they can't even get a basic deal at this point that would probably keep that conference afloat at about $20 million a school, well behind everyone else. But boy, that might be evaporating pretty soon if by the end of tomorrow we have more defections from the Pac-12 to the Big 12.
I think the next front, if I could be so bold as to predict what I think the next front will be after the Pac-12, and I think at this point now with Colorado folding Fitz, I think we're going to see some of the others fall in line fairly quickly. I think that we will see realignment happen at a much quicker rate, more schools at a faster rate. Let me throw out a statement to you and see if you agree with it. The next league to fall after the Pac-12 is just literally pulled apart and everybody finds their own place where they got to go. The next conference to fall and to shrink will be the ACC. Think that's right?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's three phases to Brett Yormark's grand plan for the Big 12. And this is the first step, adding the Western time slot, being able to play late night football. And, he said over and over he wants a school in every time zone. Well, that indicates to me that, Colorado is just one part of his westward plan. The next step would probably be adding some basketball-only schools, but I don't think that'll happen until, at least 5 years down the road or I guess it'd be 7 years down the road when they're up for renegotiating again, because he wants to decouple the football contract from the basketball and everything else contract. So he can have essentially two different conference deals for football schools and non-football schools. And then I think about at that time the ACC will be in total ruin because their contract, is just dreadful. The irony being the ACC is filled with schools that the Big Ten, SEC, and Big 12 would gladly bring in, and yet their deal pays them far less than what the Big 12 gets. And right now, nobody wants any of the Big 12 schools. So I think it just shows that in the marketplace now is weighing. There's more power in delivering ratings, having fan engagement over markets and brands. They boiled it down to real numbers now that if you're ready to participate in your college activities, they want you with a TV contract. ACCs are just stuck in a horrible deal for a very long time, and eventually some schools will figure out a way to get out. And once that happens, that conference will be 12 of their schools will be gone immediately. You'll see 4 to each of the 3 other conferences just almost immediate.
Wow.
If that happens, though, and we're jumping the gun on the immediate, but if something like that were going to happen and it's so obvious, is it even remotely possible with the ACC having now 2 examples of the inevitable ultimately happening? Could they get out ahead of it and do some sort of merger? Because in theory, and this is what, a lot of it's funny today, Tim, a lot of the national people that have sort of dogged on the Big 12 are now like, well, Brett Yormark was really smart to put the clause into the deal that, TV networks have to just accept new entries from Power 5 schools at the same value, right? So something we've talked about for a long time. There's brilliance in that, right? The ACC, in theory, then, or the schools in it, in unison, could all come and get that same deal. So if you've seen now, and if everybody in the world knows they're going to get poached, why not merge now? At that point, you could merge and what the TV deal is that you would get. It's what the Big 12 currently has. If you're a Power 5 school, by the way we understand it, you're going to get the same deal if you come over.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 has no interest in any merging right now. I think they eye a world in which they've expanded westward, and I still think there might be an eastern school in this where they end up with 4 out west and 4 out east. But they do this. They add 2 to 4 basketball, non-football schools, and then they go add 4 more. So they end up with 20 football schools, 22, 24 basketball schools, and they're coast to coast. And by adding 4 more out of the Eastern Seaboard ACC, suddenly they've got 8 in the East, and then 4 in the old. Well, I say the old Big 8, but I'm not counting Colorado on that. 4 in Texas and 4 out west, and they have incredible balance in their conference. I think that's the master plan. I find it absolutely remarkable that on this day, after what the Big 12's been through, we're talking about the Big 12 being the third surviving conference behind the SEC and Big 10, and Brett Yormark's basketball play actually presents the ability of the Big 12 to financially close the gap because he's going to maximize the value of what's going to be an incredible basketball conference.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. You just had mentioned that it looks like the Big 12 could get 4 teams out of the ACC, and we just talked about them. What 4 teams do you think would be good matches with the Big 12? What's the 4 teams you would like to see join the Big 12?
Well, based on the TV contracts as they exist, the Big 12 is going to get, I don't want to call them scraps, but the SEC and Big 10 are going to go to war over certain schools, most notably North Carolina probably because of the magnitude of that presence in North Carolina. Virginia's probably there too. You look at what the Big 12, what the Big 10 now has to pick from because lo and behold, boy, they just added Miami as an AAU school. Imagine the chances of that. And Notre Dame, just incredible chances. So it becomes interesting. Is Notre Dame part of this for the Big Ten, or are they separate? Because that's 4 or 5 schools in play. I think Notre Dame will end up there, but do they just add 3 ACC schools? I don't know. But I think some of the more football brands like Florida State, Clemson, Virginia Tech will be in the crosshairs of the SEC to get those brands. All of those schools are great fits for the Big 12. They're all kind of, more ag-based or state school type things. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to see schools like Georgia Tech, maybe North Carolina State, and then a lot of the Eastern Seaboard schools will be kind of abandoned. Boston College. I think the ones that are probably left out in the cold here are Wake Forest and Syracuse, because Syracuse just hasn't kept their facilities up. They're really beginning to slip back. But ideally, if you're the Big 12, you want some more southern schools. You hope one of the Florida schools is in play. Georgia Tech. I don't know what Duke's an AAU school. Maybe they're the perfect fit for the Big 10, but now they have so many options. If Duke's on the table, the basketball play just says Duke all over it, because at that point you're not trying to build a football brand. You're not going to catch the Big 10 and SEC in football, so you kind of turn towards just really building that basketball brand.
Fitz, as we look at the Big 12 as it currently stands for a school like Kansas State, and we look to the future here, is the future secure, you think? I mean, even with all these little things, like adding Colorado is fun, right? And we wonder about what's next. But the big picture future, doesn't this feel like the Big 12 is at least, safe in whatever the future of college sports is, as politicians are trying to get the rules and everything of NIL changed? I think the days of wondering if the SEC and the Big 10 would break off seem to be gone, right? The Big 12 feels like it has a place in whatever that future looks like.
I think the TV entities have come to realize that if you break those two off, the rest of America is just not going to participate. I mean, if 95% of the schools that matter in college football are east of the Mississippi, the rest of us don't care. We're going to watch our level of football. So I think they're beginning to realize that. And I think they probably view the Big 12 as playoff fodder. Let's get those schools in here and kick their butts and, move on to the playoffs. So I think they're coming to realize, for programming purposes too, it's going to be hard to get rid of a third conference and go down to 2, because now so many players are at the media table and might want content and might be willing to pay for it. So I don't think the Big 12 is going anywhere. It's a remarkable development, guys, that here we are with the Big 12 being so healthy, and it's because of definitive action by the Big 12 leadership once they were out from under the thumb of Texas. The second Texas decided to announce they were leaving, they lost their power in this conference, and they had an overwhelming amount of power. And boom, Bob Bowlesby went out and grabbed 4 great additions to the conference, whether they're rising brands or, in the case of Houston, just a great regional ad. And they were very definitive in hiring Brett Yormark, who has turned out to be one of the most incredible people that comes in and redefines what you're doing as a business model. And what he's doing is absolutely incredible for this conference. The Big 12 leadership saved the Big 12. It wasn't by chance. They got very definitive once they got rid of Texas. And I mean that way. They got rid of Texas. They're going to miss Oklahoma. Nobody's going to miss Texas. They came out of this with a better media rights deal than they had with those 2 schools, which is incredible and shows the value of playing quality football and basketball. People want to watch it, and the Big 12's proven that with numbers.
And when we speak of Big 12 football with the season literally we're a month and a half away from the first few games. You look at the Big 12 in football. Fitz, I'm going to be literally sick if Texas or Oklahoma wins the last Big 12 championship in football in which they're participating in. I will be ill, but I might be sick and you can come visit me in the hospital. But what's the chances of Oklahoma or Texas winning the Big 12? I guess you got to put it up there pretty high. But, man, I just – come on, the rest of the league, let's go.
Yeah. Texas already has their ducks in order. They're already, saying the Big 12's plotting against us. So it's perfect for Texas. So when they lose some games this year, it's not their fault.
Oh, not their fault. Yeah.
No,
there you go. Yeah.
So I've got Kansas State and Texas Tech in that championship game. An argument could be made that, the best thing would be Texas Tech to play, some entirely different brand that hasn't been there to show the parity of the Big 12. But, well, I'm telling you what, Kansas State has an opportunity here as, reigning Big 12 football champion. If they can do it back-to-back and keep Oklahoma and Texas, away from winning that, and if the conference can keep them both away from being in the championship game for a third year in a row, it'll just really prove the worth of the conference as a whole and might elevate, K-State to kind of the precarious top seat in the conference in football for the near future.
I am so excited, and I'm sad for the Pac-12. I hate that this has happened. I don't know. I mean, how much irony, Tim, is there that they were thumbing their nose at a lifeline to some of the schools that tried to get in there by all reports when Texas and Oklahoma left.
Yep.
To now see this.
And they didn't just thumb their nose, they insulted the schools. They said there's no one worthy of us. It wasn't just like we're not expanding this time. The presidents were really clear. They laughed at the academics of the schools. And they turned this very personal for the Big 12. I'm with you. I wish the Pac-12 could survive. But their hubris and arrogance and complete misunderstanding of the athletic landscape in college, in the college realm, has put them in this position. Horrific leadership got them here, and yet at the end of the day, I'm very confident they will blame the Big 12 for everything that's gone wrong. But let me just say that Colorado, it's an irony in itself. When this all started, many of us, including myself, said, I don't want Colorado. I mean, they left this conference. But they've been the ones that say, you know what, behind the scenes, they said, we screwed up. We, at the right time, we're coming back. And if Colorado wasn't a former member, wasn't a state adjacent to the current footprint of this conference, they wouldn't probably be in this discussion. It might be just like Oregon State and Washington State, a non-factor. But if they want to step up and be the first domino, you need the first domino to fall to get everything else to go in place.
I guess I got to ask. I mean, you just brought up Oregon State and Washington State. Well, I'll tell you what, we don't bring them up very often. What's going to happen with those two schools? Because I don't know. I don't know that anybody's talking to them. Where are those two schools?
nobody's talking to them.
Oh, man.
Unless, this report about an unknown school involves an Oregon State, which I'd find shocking. But, and those are great fan bases. They're very similar. Ironically, they're the most similar universities to the Big 12, many of the Big 12 institutions, but they have not invested heavily in sports. I mean, I think Washington State has the smallest athletic budget in the Power Five. And they're too much of an outlier geographically. Ironically, in this world in which you're going coast to coast, the Pacific Northwest, if you're going to go up there, you better be going up there for Oregon and football or Gonzaga and basketball, something like that, because they're up there. They're way up there. If you look at a map, you can see why they're focused on the four corner schools. And that's why I think if it's someone else, it's got to be in Oregon or someone like that. But I think they're going to end up with the four corner schools at the end of the day, and that will be the footprint of the Big 12.
And maybe UConn. We know those conversations have happened. All right, Fitz, what do you guys have going at GoPowerCat.com this week?
Most of this just kind of changed our content schedule quite a bit. We'll be tracking this, but of course Colorado's meeting is until 4 o'clock Central or something. So that's going to be later in the day. But I have the feeling we'll see some more action here, into early next week, because it seems like the Big 12 has set an August 1st deadline, to wrap this up so we can focus on football. Brett Yormark knows how to focus on football. George Kliavkoff talks about knowing how to focus on football.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that. All right, Fitz, we'll keep our ear to it. Could be a wild and crazy next 24 hours or so, but what a night, what a day. Yeah. Colorado's coming back at the end of the day. That'll be cool for everybody, and hopefully Coach Prime will stick around there for a while. You can find Fitz at GoPowerCat.com. You can find him on Twitter at LifeOfFitz. Good timing. We appreciate it today, man.
Hey, boys. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, Fitz.
There goes Tim Fitzgerald. What a time to be alive, Paul Savage.
Man, I'll tell you
what a time to be alive.
It's interesting times, and boy, I'll tell you what, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't even know what's going to happen at 4 o'clock with Oregon. So this is fascinating times in which we live. If you're a college football fan, this is fun times, baby.
Politicians have something cooking to try and navigate the NIL world. We'll talk about it. A couple of different things out there, including a Kansas senator. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that when we return on Sports Daily. Savage and Albrocht on a Thursday edition. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. By the way, congratulations to Adam for winning our HTO giveaway. In the spirit of giveaway, let's do some WinSurge vouchers right now to our first caller. A 4-pack of WinSurge vouchers. You get to pick the game. You call in. Jad will get you a winner. You select it. Those vouchers will redeem 869-1240 to the IHOP hotline, and we'll start that contest right now as Paul and I take a look at the politicians trying to regulate NIL. I think we all agree that some sort of regulation is needed here. I think that, the power players in the world of college athletics have clearly reached out to, representatives to try and help this. We saw Jerry Moran, senator here from Kansas, come together with a couple of Democrats. He's a Republican, so bipartisan, right, to standardize these NIL rules. Now, yesterday, we also get another bipartisan effort. Joe Manchin, who apparently played football at West Virginia, a Democrat, and Tommy Tuberville, of course, an outspoken former football coach who's now a senator on the Republican side. So 2 different bipartisan things, Paul, tells me that there is a universal effort in Washington to do something about this, right? And so from what I can tell in these 2 proposals, The keys are providing some sort of health insurance for athletes even after they play for a little while. That seems to be in both places in some form or fashion. Regulating the NIL in how it's used and making it not a pay for play, not a direct, hey, a booster is going to just basically pay a kid a ton of money to go here, which it's happening now. And then the other part of it that's interesting, and the difference, I think, from what I can tell between these two different separate proposals, is the Jerry Moran-led proposal would have a secondary organization regulate this, and the one yesterday on the Tuberville side would have the NCAA take this on. But very similar in scope with some detailed differences like that. There's an appetite for this across college sports, Paul. So something's probably going to happen. The reason they want, federal legislators involved is because they want it universal among states, right? They don't want different states to have different rules. And I get all that. And I think that's probably necessary, right? There has to be some regulation of it. But the problem, Paul, is always going to be, if in any way this is just put in place to limit what the athletes can earn, then you've got the same old problem we've always had, right? You can't have the universities make money hand over fist and not have the athletes have the opportunity to get that unless you're going to revenue share, which they're not going to do. So I don't know how you navigate those two different things, right? Like, yes, we need some universal rules. I'm all for getting, health coverage for these guys, but I'm not all for capping essentially what the athletes can earn, because I don't believe in that at all.
So we've got to make a decision. Do we want government or the schools to hop in and start overseeing everything? Well, how did the NCAA do, Jacob? How good were they at being that?
Yeah, I don't like the idea of the NCAA doing it.
No, I know, but the point is that they were supposedly the great all-seers and arbiters and those that know right from wrong and can handle these situations, and they stunk at it. They stunk. So when you look at it in terms of finding somebody to oversee this stuff, sometimes the free market's just kind of the best thing. We're running some commercials here on, I believe, on Sports Daily or even KFH and KNSS. I've heard it where they talk about Ronald Reagan used to say, one of his things was, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And you know something? That's scary. You don't need the government. Moran needs to butt out. Tuberville needs to butt out. And from Tuberville, this is about keeping other schools down, not letting them get to the echelon of an Auburn where he was for a lot of his career at that higher echelon. You get the government involved, it'd be easier for Auburns and Alabamas to stay on top. Unless it's turned over to free enterprise. It'll give the smaller schools a chance to compete, go get those kind of dollars and do what they need to do. But when they're overseen by somebody, some entity, there's a problem. All I'm saying is you can't be shocked or surprised. The whole thing that Jacob Albrock used to talk about was to give these kids a chance to make as much money as they can in the free market. And it took me a while to come around to that, but I am all for that. I've seen it. I've tasted it. I'm glad to see these kids getting some money out of this thing, at least certain kids, not all kids, obviously. So I'm for it. I don't want to see Big Daddy come in and start telling people what they can do and what they can't do. But they make it look better. Oh, we're all for the kids. We want insurance for them. We want good health for them. Oh, we're so benevolent and we're going to be their saviors and take care of them. That's baloney. That is total baloney. So I'm totally against this. Let the free enterprise reign. Let it go. Get these kids, make their deals. Let them make their deals and be done with it.
Paul, we saw TCU play in a national championship game in football.
Right.
We saw San Diego State play in a national championship game in basketball.
Correct.
Florida Atlantic in the Final Four. Right. Miami in the Final Four.
Gotcha.
And UConn win a national championship.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So I'm with you. Like,
Thank you.
There are people that spend a lot of money. Now, I'm not, I'm with you. There are people from these places that spend a lot of money to fund campaigns for a lot of these politicians, right? And so it's easy to get their attention at this level, right? It's really easy for somebody to pick up the phone and say, hey, man, we got to do something about this, right? Like, let's not be naive here. Now, the reality is the Wild West of it, and, I'm looking at an AP article because I'm trying to look at this without the slant that sometimes happens with some of these like cable news outlets. But there is a disclosure component of this. There needs to be a disclosure of how much money athletes make. I have no problem with that because I have to disclose how much money I make. Right?
I'm with you.
The under the table aspect of it, that's got to get regulated out, right? Like, how much money did you make? Here it is. Pay your taxes on it like everybody else. We'll all move on with our lives. Capping what you can make, I don't agree with at all. I don't have an issue with universities, by the way, either running these collectives. I don't mind putting the onus on the universities and then they just need to report it. That seems like the simplest way to me, but there's also a component of transfer. And like they want you to finish 3 years of your education before you can transfer. But again, that doesn't make any sense to me because you don't have that requirement for other students on campus, right? If I'm a band student, I don't have to, like, I can go I can leave and go anywhere else. So there's not transfer regulations on a band student or an art student or a music student or an education student or a, engineering student or whatever. They can go wherever they want, whenever they want to better their future prospects. So you can't do that to athletes. Like, you cannot do that unless, Paul, different than a scholarship, you have some sort of financial contract in place that says, okay, you're a student, you sign this agreement, here's how much money you're going to earn. You cannot get out of that contract without paying a penalty for 3 years. You have to complete 3 educational years before you can leave this contract and move on. Sign the contract or not, or you'll pay a penalty. Again, that's the way the rest of us work. I don't have a problem with that. I have no issue with that whatsoever. You have signed a financial agreement at that point. Here's how much you're going to make based on X, Y, Z. We have these people willing to pay you this. Now, that doesn't include endorsements because there's never a way that's going to make sense to me to tell a kid they can't take an endorsement, right? That doesn't make any sense at all. Unless it's, again, a part of that financial agreement. You can't take any endorsements. Here's what you have to do, whatever. But you can't limit in that contract how much you want to wait. If somebody says, we want to pay this kid $1 million, okay, take that through the university. The university puts pen to paper. It says, here's the disclosure. This kid's going to make $1 million from this fund, which, was funded by this person. And here's our agreement. You can't leave. You're under contract. You can't leave for 3 years. And then you can essentially become a free agent. You have to either make it more of a pro model or not. You can't half-ass it. You can't make it a pro model that benefits only the universities and, whatever, that doesn't benefit the player at all. You can't have it both ways. You got to have it one way or the other. You can either have an amateur component where kids can make as much money as they can on the open market through endorsements and whatever, just like every other student on campus, right? There's no rule that a trombone company can't go and pay some kid to use his trombone. Like, there are no rules against that. But in athletics, there are. So you either make it a pro model or you make it an amateur model, but you can't do both. You got to have it, you got to have it one way. And I don't mind making it a pro model because it is pro sports, right? It is. People pay to go see these athletes play, and they are professionals. So one or the other, Paul. You can't have both, though. It will never make sense to try to do it that way.
But therein lies the reason that government exists, and that's to stick their nose in everything. They can't sit back.
Well, there is a need for regulation. Look, there's a need for regulation in a lot. We got to regulate AI so robots don't take over the world, Paul. We should have regulated social media a long time ago so it doesn't get out of control like it is now. There's a need for regulation.
No, free speech. Now, I'm not going to let you get away with that one. free speech is very important, and you can't regulate, social media and that stuff. I'm a free speech guy. I'm a First Amendment guy, and I know you are too because you're involved in the media and your rights to be able to.
But Paul, the government has a responsibility to make sure bad things aren't happening there that put people in danger. We don't need pedophiles running free on social media.
About. That's not.
What I'm saying is there's always a place for regulation, but you can't. You have to be careful in what you want and how far that goes.
Okay.
I struggle with that balance, Paul, all the time. Like philosophically, I struggle with it all the time because I look at things and I'm like, well, how did that get so let out of control?
Right. I'm with you.
Why do I pay this much for medicine? Why does a simple medical procedure lead to 5 months worth of bills? Like there's things where you look at it and you're like, God, how can we let that happen? And then on the other side of it is the other way. Well, you don't want to be limited either. So I do struggle with that.
Right.
I have sympathy to the complexity of this situation, but there is simplicity in not capping what athletes can earn when you don't cap what universities can earn.
Right.
Unless you're going to revenue share, you can't do that.
Well, on first blush, do you think these student athletes would be better off with somebody like the NCAA or the United States government overseeing what they're doing?
The government's not going to oversee it. The government's going to put it on somebody else. The government's not going to sit there and say, all right, all they care about is that you disclose how much money you make so you can pay your taxes.
They're going to mandate it. Now, I guess is what I'm trying to say. They're going to mandate because obviously governments get involved because they want to mandate that somebody oversees it. And you're right, it's not going to be them, but they're going to mandate more than likely the university or a department within the university or the athletic department within the university. And then there's no chance of it being screwed up, right? That was sarcastic, by the way. But the point is that government will become involved and tell us what needs to be done. And quite frankly, I think I'm past all of that. I haven't heard of any true abuses of the system, and it might be because how can you abuse the system when the kids can get whatever they can get? I don't know how you could
because it's not being disclosed. Look, I think
that's another thing. Being disclosed
to me, you can just if everything funnels through the university's going to know where the money's coming from. It gets disclosed. I don't know how you ever. I mean, you can say we don't want any money going under the table, but money goes under the table all across the world, more than just in college athletics. Yeah. You can do the best you can, right? You can do, but what will what will help facilitate less money going under the table, Paul?
Tell me.
If you just allow it to be exchanged freely.
Well,
this booster, this donor, this company wants to contribute X amount of dollars to this kid. You facilitate it through the university. The university lets the IRS or whoever know, hey,
Bingo.
This is how much this kid made.
Okay.
The kid pays his taxes. We all move on with our lives, right? It's not that complicated.
That's not the kind of disclosure I'm talking about. You got to pay your taxes. You and I are big boys. We know you got to pay your taxes, and all these athletes need to pay their taxes too. I'm for that, but not getting the university involved in any other aspect of the entire situation.
Well, I'd rather have the universities directly involved than the NCAA because they're not equipped to do it.
I'm with you on that as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have found a lot of agreement.
I don't know.
Yes.
But this is just keep your eye on this because you're seeing all sorts of bipartisan cooperation on this, which means it's going to get done, right? And which means
we think so.
The right people are pushing the buttons of these federal politicians, and it's like, hey, we want to see something done. It's going to get done,
right?
What it looks like, I think, is what will get massaged out. And look, I'm willing to be an optimist and hope that we can work to the similar conclusion. There'll be, Paul, we're coming into a political year. There'll be lots of opportunities for politicians to dunk on this and say, hey, look at this great thing we did and win a lot of brownie points and all that stuff. So the timing isn't bad to get something hopefully done that's, that benefits everybody. We'll see. 869-1240 is the number to call here on Sports Daily. Paul and I will be back. Plenty more to discuss here. Major League Baseball trade deadline rolling forward. All kinds of news and realignment. It is a crazy day here on the show. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily. Sean Payton takes over in Denver, Paul. Sugar Ball Brock and Paul Savage here on this Thursday. Throws a little bit of shade at Nathaniel Hackett from last year. Part of it was their own fault, spending so much time trying to win in the offseason, the pomp, the circumstance, marching people all around, poor offensive line. Here's the part of it that's headline grabbing. Quote, "It might have been one of the worst coaching jobs in the history of the NFL. That's how bad it was."
Well, we've seen a few, not very good jobs. I mean, come on.
I don't disagree with that. Yeah. That's what's crazy, Paul. Yeah. And so it makes me wonder for Denver, because I know there are Bronco fans all over the place listen to this show, and for the Chiefs, quite frankly, just as it pertains to the AFC West. What do you think the chances are that Payton can get this right with Russell Wilson in Denver?
Well, I certainly like his chances. I mean, the guy's a winner. I mean, the guy's a Hall of Famer. So I kind of like his chances. He's been around the block a couple of times. And the one thing about the Denver Broncos, you're right. It's a passionate place. It's a place where basically there's only one real sport in the entire state of Colorado, and I hate to say this, Colorado Buff fans and Colorado State Ram fans and Rockies fans and Avalanche fans. It's a state that is basically owned by the Broncos. And so I think there's a good chance. I mean, I think Payton was a perfect pick, even though this was an unusual pick because, compensation – made in the selection of a coach. You don't see that kind of stuff happen very, very often. So the Denver Broncos believe this is their man, and why wouldn't they? I think it's a great pick. I think he'll probably get the job done. He knows how to win.
Yeah, I don't know. So it becomes really this question, Paul, of can they compete with Kansas City and the Chargers? I think they could compete with the Chargers. I don't see it with Kansas City. I do think they'll be better, right? It all still comes back to Russell Wilson.
It does.
And can Sean Payton get enough out of Russell Wilson to make it work? I don't know. I really don't know.
Right.
And I do think it's one of the more curious storylines early in the year to watch, because let's think of it this way, Paul. When you look at the Jets, we're all focused on the Jets, right? Great defense, good young players, a lot of good young skill guys. They bring in Rodgers. Can he make the difference? That's the exact same thing we were saying about Denver last year. They had a great defense coming in, all these great young skill players. They just need their quarterback, and they brought in Russell Wilson, and can it get done? So there's an obvious comparison there between the two. And I think if we're considering, maybe the Jets can get it done, we probably should be giving more consideration to can the Broncos, because Aaron Rodgers wasn't that good last year either, just like Russell Wilson. So if we're just considering, we think Aaron Rodgers can return to it with the Jets, and I do think that, I suppose I probably need to give more consideration to Russell Wilson returning more to form now with Sean Payton, who we know is, coached great offenses before. Maybe it is on the table, and maybe we should consider it more than we have.
Mm-hmm. I think you're onto something. However, I think you can actually narrow this thing down to how well will the offensive line protect Russell Wilson. I think really and truly everything that you've talked about, good young players, great, a great organization, all the things.
They spent a lot of money on the line this offseason.
That's right. So the question is, do they stay healthy? Do they protect Russell Wilson? Do they give him the time to find those good young receivers that are on this football team? And if the answer to that question is yes, this will be a successful season for the Denver Broncos. If the answer is no, we know where that goes. We've seen that play before, and it won't be a good thing. So, I'm a little more specific than you. It's all about offensive line play. Probably about
shout out to Ben Powers.
Yeah.
Shout out to Capen's Ben Powers,
right,
who signed there in the offseason.
That's right. And so I guess it boils down to this. How much protection does Russell Wilson get? That's where we're at.
All right. Let's come back. We'll wrap up this edition of Sports Daily on KFH.
For 25 years, Stamps.com has made mailing and shipping easy. All you need is a computer and printer. Imagine mailing and shipping right from your desk, anytime. No traffic, no waiting, no hassle. Plus, Stamps.com gives you discounts up to 84%. Sign up for Stamps.com today. Use code PROGRAM for a 4-week trial, plus postage and a digital scale. That's Stamps.com, code PROGRAM.